Hi, A.J.Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, baby metal fan, and today I'm going to be talking about what is actually the last song on the third album on Metal Galaxy, Arcadia. And I think this conversation has to be taken in the context of the previous two songs of the trilogy, Shine and Starlight. I think, I've been putting this one off a little bit because the prospect of finishing the album made me a little sad. Um, and I also thought I was going to have a massive amount to say about this. And in hindsight, as I approach it, I find that maybe I don't have as much to say about it as I thought I would, because I've already talked extensively about the previous two songs in the trilogy. But hopefully there'll be enough here that you find interesting. Before we start, please check out my Patreon page. Please, consider buying a book. I have a new book which has just gone available for pre-order called Burning Shakespeare. I'll do a video talking a little bit more about that. You can't order the paperback and hardcover until release day, which is the last day of March of 2022, but you can pre-order the ebook now, and you should be able to get that anywhere on Amazon or any other place where you buy books. And it's fun, and actually it's not disconnected from the subject of these songs. I think that it's a story that deals with similar things. It's upbeat and positive and hopefully funny and playful, but it also wrestles with questions about art and mortality. So, if you like the kind of things that I talk about here, you might like that. Anyway, okay, on with Arcadia. Thanks. Okay, so what a great revved up start. The previous songs, right? You have to look at Arcadia as part of the trilogy of lights, and the previous two songs, Starlight and Shine, both have this quite reflective, ruminatory quality. They get rousing, but they don't have this driving speed, that high up tempo kind of rhythm to it. And there's a sense that this song, although it's part of that same group, is clearly doing something. And we hear that right from the get-go, right? In those driving rhythms. And we move into this sort of soaring guitar piece here. And you hear that even the guitar line. I'm going to talk about melody a lot in this song, but the guitar line has a very melodic quality, right, by metal standards, and it's reminiscent, I think, of something like Road of Resistance, and we're going to see echoes of that throughout the song, including in the choreography. Okay, before the vocal even starts, you hear how all those little shifts. This is classic baby metal, right? I think I'm assuming there's going to be a new album, right? But I do think that there is something about this last song on the third album which synthesizes so much of what baby metal have been about from the beginning. And what we hear in this sound, I think, that synthesizing of all the classic elements of their sound, the complex instrumentation, the prog rock time signatures, those dun, 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 right? This shifting of that, the ratcheting up, the way that the instrumental sort of lays the table for the vocal, and the constant disruption of musical expectation, so that the song is a series of surprises, right? For people watching this video, you've heard this song so many times that you might forget what it's like to listen to it for the first time. So try to remember what that experience is like, or listen to it with somebody else, and watch the way they're constantly wrong-footing the audience. Dun, 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 you know, it's like, well, where's it going to go next, right? That's classic baby metal. It's like everything they've learned over the past, at this point, I guess, 8-9 years, sort of coming to focus in this final song of the third album. And of course, the other thing that it has in common with those other songs, and particularly with something like Road of Resistance, is that epic scale, right? That again, the previous songs in the trilogy have this more thoughtful quality to it. But now we sort of worked our way through some of the angst, and now we're embracing what's going to come forward. I suppose this is as good a time as any to talk about that three-part structure. And I think that, you know, I talked a lot about death and loss in Starlight and Shine in particular. So much so that coming into recording this, I was a little disappointed in some ways, because I thought this might be my last baby metal song, at least for a while, until there's new material. And I don't know that I have actually that much to say about it, because I already said so much about the previous songs in the sequence. And I think you have to think of them as a sequence, right? They're not accidentally placed together on the album. They're grouped together, and they usually flow into each other in live performance. They're clearly supposed to be movements within a larger structure. And I think that the thing that comes to mind most are two things. One is a kind of medieval triptych, you know, those sort of 3-panel pictures where you see a related theme developed in 3 separate images, whether it's, you know, it's often religious, right, which is not inappropriate, I think, for baby metal and for this song. But, you know, subjects of the life of Christ, you know, the sort of Last Supper, crucifixion, resurrection. That might be one triptych, or you know, the final judgment, you know, judgment, hell, heaven, kind of thing. Also not entirely inappropriate to this sort of song. So I think of the 3 songs as being related like that, but also I think of them as in the way that you might think of something like a Requiem Mass, which, you know, is has a long musical tradition, compositions by lots of famous composers throughout history. And if you listen to a Requiem Mass, the different portions of the Mass are not all sort of miserable and funereal. There are moments like the Sanctus, you know, which are quite positive, right? Because in religious terms, even within a funeral, we're also thinking about resurrection. And I feel that, you know, there's something similar going on here. You know, if we think of Starlight as being about grief, anger, loss, search for meaning, and Shine as the sort of recognition of that loss, but trying to move beyond it with some sort of hope of reconnection, then Arkadia is an acceptance and a conviction to move forward. And that should emerge from consideration of the lyric. Now, death itself is not an overt part of this, as it isn't in a Sanctus within a Requiem Mass, right? That the celebratory will to move forward can be part of a funeral without it being expressly about death, right? So, let's go to the lyric. Oh, man. See what I mean about the way that the music that sets the stage for that voice, right? 小さな胸に宿る暗闇にお灯すかけら. So in my small heart, or in your small heart, no pronouns, right? In the small heart, that a shard lights up the darkness, a fragment of something that sort of creates life. It enkindles the darkness. Oh, mabushiku hikari matoi. Kagayaki wa setsuna ni hoto bashiru, a dazzling light. Oh, a dazzling light that gushes out in the moment, just appears out of nowhere, kind of thing. And then we have the lines of English. Yeah, it's great to see Moa smile, right? That we haven't seen a lot of that in Shine, particularly. That there's a sort of you feel the sort of joyfulness of this song as a sort of postscript to the previous stuff, and you also hear it in the lyric, right? That we're not sort of focused on death. And in many ways, I don't think the song is really about death per se at all. It's about resolve to move forward out of any kind of difficulty, right? I'm merely referring to death because I think it was central to the previous songs. But I am going to come back to it in a second when we talk about what Arkadia is, what the title is referring to. So, so glorious, you just be ambitious. Now, what does ambitious mean? Well, obviously it can mean a lot of things. I don't think it means seeking for power or money or fame. I don't think that's it. I think we're talking about ambition in terms of personal capacity, the desire to reach for something that is sort of at that should be out of reach, right? That you're going to go for it anyway, right? We talk about, in sports, people talk about athletic arrogance, right? Going after something that you shouldn't really be able to go after, that it seems beyond your capacity. And I think we're using the term ambition in the same sense, right? To live, to achieve to the fullest extent of your ability. That's what I'm getting from the performance, from the sort of openness of the choreography. Hokori takaku hata o kakagete. So raise the flag with pride, right? And you see what I mean about that, the sort of overlapping with something like Road of Resistance. Similar kind of anthemic, stand by your guns, go forward, meet whatever challenges are coming, and do it with hope, and with positivity and with energy. It's glorious, you just be ambitious. Hoshi no kakera odaite. So holding on to a fragment of a star, grabbing onto a fragment of a star. Now, we've seen stars and starlight in the previous songs, and we talked about the connection of that starlight to other people whom perhaps we have lost. But here we're sort of seizing onto that light. Before it was about reconnecting with people, but in this song, I think it's embracing that light, embracing the fragment of that shard of brilliance. And making it shine through you, right? This is what I'm talking about ambitious. Yeah. And then ima, now. Oh man, that's just the juxtaposition of that double-timed bass drum and that half-speed vocal. Man, they are so good at this, right? That the melody that now sort of flows over the top of it. It's so beautiful and so powerful because you don't lose that energy, but you're able to sort of focus on the lyricism of that melody. And, people constantly refer me to other Japanese bands and say, oh, well, if you like this, you should listen to Love Bites or Bandmade or Hanabie or any number of things. And I can like a lot of that stuff, but the thing that I never get from any of them is this mastery of tune, of melody that we set against all that sort of hard metal sound, right? But we don't not lose this incredibly beautiful and catchy melody. This is what makes, for me, this is what makes baby metal stand out from all of the rest. And when people say, oh, well, if you like this, you'll like this, and it almost never works for me. I can admire a lot of that stuff. I can admire their instrumental work or whatever, but it's apples and oranges. They are utterly different to me. And you know, this comes back to those sort of larger ideas about what makes baby metal, and it's that hybridity, their ability to master not just different genres, but different feels of music, what the function of music is. That thing that gets you in your heart when you listen to this, that's about melody. That's about that voice rising to hit that tune that is striking some sort of deep, powerful chord within you, supported by all that sort of instrumental virtuosity and intensity. That's what this is about. Anyway, I forgot where we were. For your dream, for your faith, for your life. For your life, okay, so before we were talking about how much we were talking about death, we're now talking about the condition of living, right? And I think sometimes people look at this song and see it as somehow, oh, well, it's about, you know, heaven. It's about afterlife. It's about moving beyond mortality and into the bliss of the beyond. We're reading Arkadia as a sort of synonym for heaven or afterlife. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's what the song's about. I think the song is about living. It's not about dying. Right? It's certainly not about... I think there are speculative elements about what may come after life in the previous songs, particularly in Shine. But I don't think that's what this is about. I think that's what's saying, having made the sort of optimistic choice to believe in the possibility of reconnection with people who are gone, now we come back to live our lives. And that's what Arkadia is about. For your dream, for your faith, for your life. These things come together. Belief, right? And ambition, right? A dream is another form of ambition, right? To imagine a future for yourself and determine to go for it 100%. That's what we're doing here. Ugoki hajimeta mirai no chizu wa kimi no naka ni ara aru. So the map, the plan of your a sort of active or activated future, a proactive, that's a terrible word, a plan for your possible active agent, a future in which you have agency is in your possessions, in your hands or in your mind, right? You have what you need to move forward to achieve the things that you want to achieve. That's what it's saying, right? Kimi no naka ni, right? It's inside you. Oh, gosh, it's so good. So, yeah, no more tears, no more pain, no more crying. Now, I think this is why people sometimes think of this song as being somehow about having lived and died and moved on from such things, and now we don't have to worry about things anymore. I don't think that's right. I think what we're saying, and I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, but I think what we're saying is that there is a way to approach life understanding the downs, the negatives, the difficulties, the problems, the mortalities, right? And to sort of power through with positivity, to recognize those things, and then to say, okay, we're done mourning, and now we press on, right? あの、光の彼方へはるか遠く、目指すは夢のアルカディア。So beyond the light, far away, we're shooting for, we're aiming for the dream of Arcadia. Arcadia, and I'm going to talk more in detail about Arcadia. For now, let's just say it's an idealized version of the world, right? I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then we get a little instrumental break. Now, you see what I mean about the choreography from Road of Resistance? That we've got that sort of cavalry mounting. We're riding horses into the future, right? And I think it has something of that same. It's not combative exactly, but rising to meet challenges head on, to charge them. I think that's central to what this song is. You get that moment also of the three girls coming together that has that almost that Ijime Dame Zettai kind of moment to it. That coming together, that resolve. You see it again in karate. It's such a sort of central motif for baby metal, that idea of shared strength, right? Coming out of the intricate, but again, melodic guitar solo that moves us to sort of draw together to build a kind of community out of the experience to sort of help us all move forward, right? Because individually we might not be able to. Oh man, so good. It's so good. Hikari yori hayaku. Faster than light can reach. Hagane yori tsuyoku. Stronger than steel can protect. Shimei no michi ni osore naku. So, dorehodo no yamigo. Fearless on the path of our mission, our forward movement. Moving forward, right? So we're moving faster than light, stronger than steel, and without doubt or fear or a sense of negativity or bad things happening. Yeah. Dorehodo no yami ga oitsukoso. So no matter how much we are overwhelmed with darkness, we'll continue to walk the path that we believe in. Shinjita kono michio. Yeah. So we're going to continue to walk the path that we have faith in. Again, very Road of Resistance, right? Yeah. And you hear that, and then we have this little musical segue as it ratchets up to that sort of expansive chorus. Da 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 da. Oh man, it's perfect, right? It's perfect the way that it builds this in, right? So for your dream, for your faith, for your life, ugoki hajimeta jirai no uta wa yume ni hibiki au Yeah, I talked to Stephen Chen and Capable Paramedic about this, and the translation they suggested, which I think is good, is the songs of the transforming times reverberate in our dreams, which is a really beautiful way of putting it, right? Um, the music that has in the past been sort of coming out of a position of transition, something that has changed us and reverberates through our dreams as we carry them forward, right? It's a beautiful way of thinking about the power of music to stay in your head, right? You think about the way that we hold on to songs, or that you hear a song that you haven't heard for a long time, it immediately takes you back to a particular moment in time when you first heard it or when you had been listening to it a lot. And it fills you with the emotion of not just the music, but of everything that was going on in your life at the time, right? So that sense of the songs of the transforming times reverberating in our dreams. And that's what we're listening to here, right? The song is being offered as something that we should carry with us as we move forward. Um, Through whatever is to come, that this is what will continue to power us, this sense of positivity. No more tears, no more pain, no more cry. Yeah, and we're back on the horses. So, Hanochikai no daichi e haruka touku e kagayaki hanetsu arukaria. So we're heading for the land of that resolution, the vow, the promise that we have made, and it's far away, but it's shining brightly. This Arcadia, which is gleaming in the distance, and that's what we're heading for. That's our ambition. See how at the end of the song the sort of frenetic cavalry charge choreography gives way to these sort of stronger, slower, more centered movements within the choreography that says, okay, we're ready to sort of stand tall and open-hearted to face the future. Yeah, the phrase that always comes to mind with something like this is girding your loins. It's a very old-fashioned phrase to sort of steel yourself for what is going to come forward, what's going to come next. And I think that's what they're doing here, right? That at the end of the song, we go through all that sort of frantic pace, and then it becomes sort of much more still, much more composed and aspirational. Again, we get that sort of upward gesture of sort of standing up to face the future. Okay, so I think the energy of the song is really clear, and I think it's a fitting way to finish the album and many of the concerts, and of course my own discussions, at least until there is more music to talk about. And I think the lyric is pretty straightforward, right? I don't think it's not without nuance, but I think it's fairly straightforward. The one thing which is a little odd in some ways is the title, right? And it's not just, and it's obviously something that repeats in the song, that the name Arkadia, or given its Japanese pronunciation, Arkadia. And I was curious as to why they should choose this particular term to talk about this sort of ideal state, whether it's a place or a time or whatever. And so I sort of pulled, I did a little research, and I pulled my usual resources, including my Japanese mother-in-law and Stephen Chen and Capable Paramedic, and they supplied some interesting things. And one of them was this idea that Arkadia has become a word in Japan that is a kind of a generalized term for an ideal condition. That, they used to use terms like specifically Buddhist terms like Gokuraku Jodo or Saiho Jodo, and sort of Western terms like utopia or even El Dorado or Shangri-La. Those words I associate with sort of seaside cottages in the 70s in England, but I think it has a similar function, right? These are words to mean this is a perfect place. These words sort of come in and out of fashion and get replaced by other terms, and Arkadia is one of them. And my mother-in-law pointed out she did a search for businesses that included the name Arkadia, and she found things like Arkadia Dentistry, which I feel very positive about. But let me back up. What exactly is Arkadia? Where does it come from? And I'm going to add some sort of Western context to that word. And I'll, full disclosure, is Koba or other members of the Baby Metal team aware of this? I have no way of knowing. I can't find any reference to it in interviews or anything like that. So it could just be that Arkadia is being used as a sort of general sort of reference to a kind of all-purpose positive space. And I'm thinking in some ways psychological space rather than a physical place, right? Classically, Arkadia is a kind of a prelapsarian version of the world for non-Christian people. It emerges out of Greco-Roman mythology as an ideal space in which shepherds and shepherdesses coexisted with fauns and nymphs and earth spirits within this very pastoral, bucolic space, right? And it's set up as a specifically idealized place opposed to cities, because the city was seen as the place where humanity came together in corruption. And I don't necessarily mean sin, but in some of that corruption is environmental. Some of it is about a certain sort of cynical profiteering. It's about all the stuff that people, all the negative stuff that people generate when they come together and organize and become civilized, right? That we lose from this idealized, pastoral, romantic version of the countryside. And originally, the concept of Arkadia goes back to I think 3rd century BCE, specifically as a response to Alexandria, which at the time was the biggest city in the area, and it was considered, corrupt, and it was a source of disease and so on. That's in Theocritus. And then, in Virgil's Eclogues, we have a similar version of Arkadia, a kind of the pastoral myths of his Eclogues, which were written specifically in response to the expansion of Rome as a city, right? So whenever you have points in time, points in history where cities get bigger and more in some ways problematic, then you have people writing about the joys of a countryside and a version of the world, a version of life which has gone away, right? So in the Renaissance, this became a huge deal because the European population expanded to such an extent, and you got the rise of major cities, particularly London. And in London, you got the sort of the rise of a new pastoral, and again, specifically in response to the increasing sprawl, urban sprawl of London. So you get it in things like Sir Philip Sidney's sort of lengthy prose piece of the Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia, which is a story about nymphs and shepherds, but it's really about fancy courtiers going into the countryside and pretending to be nymphs and shepherds and so on, right? And this is often the way that the pastoral works. It works as a retreat, a place that people go to escape from their version of civilization, which is in some ways corrupt. And you go out into the countryside and you reconnect with nature, and then you leave it. You go back to the city, right? And if you're familiar with Shakespeare, of course, this is a major theme throughout the middle comedies. You think of plays like Midsummer Night's Dream, or As You Like It, even Twelfth Night, where people leave the city behind and go to sort of discover themselves in the forest, quite literally in the forest, right? And at the end of the play, they leave. They go back to the city, but they go back transformed. They go back with a clearer sense of who they are and what they value and who their relationship should be with, and so on, right? But this idea of the pastoral as a retreat that you go to and then move away from, I think, is central to the idea of Arcady, the English version, or Arcadia, or Arkadia in the Japanese version, right? And part of the issue is that, whenever people in these stories go into, especially in Shakespeare, when people go into the countryside, they bring the danger of human contamination, right? That they're going to somehow destroy it. And this, to me, is a very Japanese idea about trying to maintain the purity of their own country in this massively urbanized, industrialized country, but to sort of preserve the purity of nature. Now, obviously, we're not referencing, Arkadia is not referencing nature in a very deliberate sense. And you see no attempt within those stage shows to evoke, hills and trees and streams. We're still very much in that futuristic, spacey, galactic kind of concept of what Arcadia is. But I think it's a concept of escaping from all those kind of normal urban social and societal pressures, the negative parts of civilization, to reconnect to yourself as a natural being. And I think that's what's going on, right? However, there is a complicating factor. And this is where I'm saying I don't know if Koba and everybody else is aware of this or not. I don't know. But in the Renaissance, Arcadia becomes expressly connected to the idea of mortality, right? And I think this makes sense, and whether they're conscious of it or not, it makes perfect sense to me. Because if the first two songs, particularly Shine, does have this sort of exploration of death and loss, it makes sense to me that Arcadia, even though it's a much more upbeat and positive song, doesn't move completely away from it, right? And the way that Arcadia and death intersect is through a particular phrase. And that phrase is et in Arcadia ego, the Latin meaning, and I too was in Arcadia, right? And this particularly is represented visually in painting. It first comes up in Guercino's painting from 1620 of that name, Et in Arcadia Ego, and Nicolas Poussin 20 years later, so 1620 to 1640-ish, I think, for the Poussin And this is the dominant way that Western culture has dealt with the idea of Arcadia, which is to say, it's an ideal place. It's a place away from the corruption of civilization, but it's not a place away from death. In those paintings, when the Et in Arcadia ego, I too was in Arcadia, and that's the voice of death, right? Even in the most perfect version of human existence, even in the most idealized myth of human existence, there was still death, right? This is what partly makes it different from the Garden of Eden, because the Garden of Eden doesn't have death until you do something that brings death into it, right? The possibility of death. But this sort of less expressly Christian version of the same story, the sort of the garden, which is Arcadia, already has death in it because that's normal and that's natural, right? Even though it's a beautiful, perfect, idealized place and people treat each other well and so on, right? So, and it's this, if you're familiar with the Tom Stoppard play, Arcadia, this is the way that it's used there. And there's a moment in which that phrase "et in Arcadia ego" comes up, and somebody misunderstands it and thinks that it's a good thing to say, "Well, I was in Arcadia as well. I'm in Arcadia too." It's like, yeah, but it's the voice of death, right? And that's the thing you have to wrestle with. It's not an accident that it's the name of the first episode of Brideshead Revisited, which is a sort of story about somebody going back to a country house where he was billeted during the war and wrestling with ideas of death. It was if you watch the recent Star Trek series Picard, the last two episodes of the first season, in which, spoiler alert, Captain Picard is diagnosed with a fatal disease, is called "Et in Arcadia ego." So specifically, this phrase is Arcadia is always about death within the positive, within the ideal, right? Not excluded from it. This is why I was saying I don't think the song is supposed to be about heaven, about transcending death, suddenly moving beyond it and never having to think about it again. That's not it. That's why we're still talking about ambition and being positive and being glorious, because it's about life. Life in the context of the ever-presence of death. You can't escape it. That's not what the song's about, right? So if there's a three-part structure to this, then, it's not about dealing with death and then escaping from death and moving past it. That's not it. Except psychologically. It's about wrestling with death, accepting it, and then continuing to live your life, conscious of the fact that the one thing we all have in common is that we all die. And that's normal and it's natural. And it should, therefore, give you the spur that you need to do the stuff that you want to do to the fullest extent of your ability, because you have one shot, right? That's the point. So where does this leave the song overall? I think we're not evading death or transcending it. The song, in my reading, recognizes death as a part of life. The journey that we are on is the one that we're living. It's not a journey beyond life, though it was to a certain extent within Shine. Death is a condition of the journey. Death is something to be accepted, not feared. It's not a source of grief, a condition of existence. And as such, I think Baby Metal come full circle, right? First song on the first album is Baby Metal Death. And as I said before, that death and deaths balances being and non-being, right? Death being the copula, the verb to be, to exist, juxtaposed with the absence of life, death, right? So in a sense, we at the end of the third album, we loop back around, but I think it's a little different because this isn't the sort of dark Halloween iconography of conventional metal in its attitude to death. It's not Grim Reapers and statues and spooky stuff. That's not it. It's not the sort of showy, cool horror movie cliche version of death. It's the joyful recognition that it's because of death that we value every moment of life. This is why the English words tell you to be ambitious and find glory. It doesn't mean fame or fortune. It means live life to the fullest, seize the day, reach for the best, the most you can possibly achieve. It's about reach. No more tears doesn't mean there's going to be no more sadness. It's a holistic sense of life which recognizes that the ups and downs are part of the journey and should be celebrated. Yes, we experience grief, but then you have to sort of move beyond it and do what you can with what time you have. Does that sound positive? It does to me. It does to me. The Arkadia that we're talking about is not a place. It's not a period. It's not a nostalgia for the past or anything like that. It's a state of mind, right? The song calls it Yume no Arkadia. It's an Arcadia of dreams. It's a mental construct, right, that we're going to live in. We imagine in the future in order to aspire to, because it's something that we build, right, through our own effort. The map, the plan in order to activate this future. This is what the song is about. The plan to activate this future is already inside you. Kimi no naka ni, right? What you need is already there. So the Arkadia that we're in pursuit of is the way we're going to live our lives. That to me is a really positive idea. And this is part of what makes baby metal, right? I mean, I said before about why I particularly like them as opposed to some of the sort of similar metal-ish bands coming out of Japan. Especially the metal bands with predominantly female members. But it's not just the music that makes them different. It's also that positivity, that the desire to lift up the audience in a sort of shared community that recognizes the darkness. I mean, I think, in the last couple of years, I think we're all feeling this, right? I know I am. That recognizes the darkness around us and the difficulty, but finds things that are worth living for, that are worth trying for, and gives you the sort of the energy and the desire to move forward with those things. And I think it's there in the lyric, and I think it's there in the tonality of the music and the energy and the performance, all of it. I think it's what makes baby metal. It's not about, the wacky Japanese, weird, strange. That's not it at all. That's not it. I understand that that's maybe what draws people to them initially. But they're worth more than that, worth a lot more than that. And, since this is my last video for a while, I wanted to say that. I want to say that's what makes them special, and I hope that they continue to do what they do in whatever form they feel they want to make it. I'm all for change, for evolution, but I would like to see continuity because they are valuable to me, to the audience, to the world. I think there's a rare positivity here that I think we can hold on to going forward. And I think this is as good a time as any to stop. This is the last baby metal song that I will talk about until we get more. I'm assuming we will get more. I will continue to talk about other bands. I will continue to talk about other things. The interview that I just did with Tom DeLonge, if you've seen that, I think there are actually moments of resonance when he's talking about ambition and songwriting. He says something about open vowels, which I think is really interesting for this song because, Arkadia has those very open vowels. Like, we were talking about the Requiem Mass, those hosannas and alleluia sounds, which are just positive, joyful kind of spiritual exclamations. And I think Arkadia, part of the reason that it has been chosen, apart from all the other things that I've said, is that it has those very open vowels. Anyway, so yeah, I think that, I'll continue to make videos. I'll continue to use my Patreon page. If you haven't checked that out, please do. And I'll be talking about other things. I will be talking also about the book that I have coming out, Burning Shakespeare, which I have already put a little book trailer up for, so check that out. And, hopefully I'll continue to provide product, content, and hopefully we'll have more baby metal music to talk about soon. In the meantime, please like, comment, subscribe, set the little notification bell thingy, and be glorious, be ambitious. Thanks.